Once this passes, which it will, Mark Carney will have a majority both in the House and in committee. As a result of the by-elections and floor crossers, Mark Carney finally has his coveted majority, and he is wasting no time in using it to remove the impediments of the opposition in committee that had been holding his government to account. In addition, he has officially rejected Jason Jake's application for a permanent position as the Parliamentary Budget Officer, and instead accepted an old classmate and bureaucrat to that position instead. Let's take a look. Carney government details plans to change Commons committees. This is being widely reported now. So, Mr. McKinnon decided to post this the other day, and this is what it says. Our government is committed to working hard on an ambitious agenda to build Canada strong. Liberals now comprise a majority of MPs in the House of Commons. Prime Minister Mark Carney and his government are determined to work constructively, both in the House and in parliamentary committees. There is an undeniable, long-standing principle in Parliament. A party that has the majority of seats in the House also has a majority in committees. For that reason, I intend to give notice of a motion that reflects this principle to be considered in the House in the coming days. And he shows a screenshot of that motion. For those interested, this is what it is. And it's basically a bunch of gobbledygook that says we need to change the actual committee structure, and it references different things that have happened. And it's a long way of saying that they want a majority in committee itself. The federal government is proceeding with its plan to increase its influence over House of Commons committees, now that it has reached majority status after a series of floor crossings and 3 recent by-election wins. On Tuesday afternoon, Government House Leader Stephen McKinnon announced a notice of motion on the issue to be considered by the Commons in coming days. Under the motion posted by Mr. McKinnon, the number of Conservatives and Bloc Québécois MPs on committees would remain the same, but more Liberals would be added. The result would be an increase in the influence of the governing party. Because the NDP only has 6 MPs, well shy of the 12 required for official party status, they do not have any members on Commons committees. So, what does this mean? Well, we talked about what this would probably mean last week or the week before, and it has come to pass. So, Mark Carney does not actually need to prorogue Parliament in order to actually get a majority in committee. He would have if he had a bare majority of 172, because in order to actually pass a motion like this, if he only had 172 seats, he would have needed to actually have the Speaker vote with them. And that typically doesn't happen when it comes to procedural changes. The Speaker is expected and conventionally goes along with what the status quo is. So this is why Mark Carney was speculating to be proroguing Parliament after the by-elections. But now that he has the numbers and he doesn't need to rely on prorogation, he can do it with just a simple motion. So what does this mean? This means all the investigations continue. That's a good thing. And all of the bills stay in flight, which can be argued whether that's a good thing or not. But that's what that means, just so everybody understands. And this is what it means for the actual committee composition. So here's the Ethics Committee. Now, in the Ethics Committee, the Public Accounts Committee, and the Government Operations Committee, that's the mighty OGO, where Kelly McCauley is the chair of, those are the committees that are always chaired by the official opposition. So here's the Ethics Committee. This is John Brassard, and he is the chair. And you can see that right now there is 1, 2, 3, 4 different opposition members that are on the committee between the Bloc and the Conservatives. And from the Liberals' perspective, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's a tie. Well, in a minority parliament, this is where it's advantageous when it comes to the composition of these specific committees, because even if it's a tie, the tie goes to the chair, and the chair is on the opposition, so that gives the opposition a majority on these committees. Now, The problem is that those votes only go to the chair in a tie. So what this motion is going to do is it's going to add one more Liberal to this committee, meaning that the Liberals will always have a majority when it comes to that committee. So it will never end up in a tie unless one of the Liberals votes with the opposition. So this can have some repercussions, many of which we can speculate on, but we will just wait and see how the Liberals operate in committee and see if they operate like they did with the NDP in the last parliamentary session when they shut down any investigation that they didn't like. But even in that case, because they had the majority on committee, they were able to do that. The Conservatives were still able to actually get some investigations done because of how bad it looked that the Liberals were shutting down these committees. So we'll see what happens. Let's look at a committee that isn't typically chaired by the opposition, see how that changes. So this is the Heritage Committee, and this will follow the rules of just about every other committee as well, aside from the 3 opposition-chaired ones that I talked about before. So every other committee, aside from the 3 that I mentioned, are chaired by the government. So you have a Liberal chair here, and there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people of the opposition that are on the committee, and 1, 2, 3, 4 members that are on the government, right? So in this case, they're going to be adding one more Liberal, which means if the opposition votes together all the time, it will always go to a tie, in which it will always be won by the government because the tie goes to the chair and the chair is part of the government. That's what it means when it comes to committee. So at least they're not reducing the opposition membership by 1, but they're increasing the Liberal membership by 1. So once this passes, which it will, Mark Carney will have a majority both in the House and in committee. McKinnon also stated that, hey, listen, there's a long-standing tradition that the party with the most seats, and if they have a majority of seats in the House, then they have the majority in committee. So this is technically true. Now, why we have to be careful in this is, although there is an inclination to push back on that and say, well, you know, this wasn't the case at the time of the election, and this is what Canadians voted for, and the floor crossers gave Mr. Carney the majority. That's all true. The issue is this is why we have to look at the big picture. What if the Conservatives win a minority government and they won with 170 seats, okay, in the next election? So they're the government, but they're in a minority parliament. And then not long after that, 5 seats end up going to a by-election for one reason or another. People retire, they move on to different jobs, whatever. And as a result of those by-elections, the Conservatives end up winning seats that they didn't have before. So they take NDP seats, Bloc seats, or Liberal seats. Well, now that government would move from 170 to 175. And no floor crossing. So if we argue against Mr. McKinnon now, despite the fact that we are very upset with the floor crossing, we would have to argue against the Conservatives in that future situation if it happened. Because if we just say at the end of the general election, the government with the least amount of seats has to have, or government in a minority capacity has to stay as a minority throughout their entire term of government, then if that scenario that I outlined happened when it came to the Conservatives being in a minority situation but moving to a government majority as a result of by-elections only, they would be expected not to adjust committee as well. So this is where we have to be very careful on what we're actually fighting against and what we're trying to say is the MO of Parliament. So this is just us being completely objective and trying to look at different situations where it may not exactly be the same, but the same argument still applies. So in this case, there's nothing in the rules that is preventing the Liberals from doing this. In fact, it reinforces what they're doing. So it is what it is. Our job is to call out any of the impropriety as we see it. Now, the other thing that the Liberals did, and this occurred only yesterday, is they officially appointed the new parliamentary budget officer. And no, it's not Jason Jakes.
Le bureau va maintenant compiler les résultats.
The table will now compile the results of the vote.
Yeas pour 164, 164. Nays contre 153, 153.
Je déclare la motion.
I declare the motion carried.
So what's interesting in that is the Liberals won 164 to 153. The NDP actually voted with the Liberals on that one. If they hadn't, this motion would have been defeated, and Annette Ryan would not have actually been appointed on that specific vote. So this is where it comes back to fragile majority. Even though Mark Carney has, I believe it's 174 seats now, only 164 voted in that vote. So you cannot count on every single vote being there every single time. This is where confidence votes, when they come up, they become very, very important for this government. And this is why only a couple of seats majority doesn't mean it's the be-all and end-all. So I just wanted to point that out. Now, when it comes to Annette Ryan, what's the story with her? Well, she's been a government bureaucrat for most of her career and worked in different government agencies. So that can be a problem right off the bat, because it means she's worked in the apparatus of government. She has taken the loyalty pledge to government, meaning that you're supposed to act in the best interest of the governing party, whomever that is, while you are executing your job. So how did this come out, and what types of questions did she face when she was actually called to testify? Well, she was called to testify in March of this year. And something came out that was, well, it was unexpected.
The PBO works for Parliament, not the Prime Minister or any government. Will you commit to maintaining full independence from the executive branch and working for parliamentarians representing Canadians?
I do indeed.
Thank you. As it's been reported, you were at Oxford during the same time as the Prime Minister, Mark Carney. Just given your past relationship, how can Canadians be assured you will uphold the impartiality and independence of the PBO office if you become permanent?
Thank you for that question right off the top. I've seen the discussion of my past acquaintanceship with the Prime Minister. I took a 2-year Masters of Economics program at Oxford University. The Prime Minister was already there. He was in the year previous to me. As Canadians, we knew each other in the program and so on, but had different social circles and so on. I saw him again in a professional capacity when I was chief economist at Industry Canada and he was governor of the Bank of Canada. I supported a committee at the time of roughly 20 deputy ministers who would meet on a regular basis to discuss economic matters. During that time, I would discuss agenda questions, topics that the deputies might pose to him in those meetings. I typically dealt with his office rather than the governor himself. And so I would say that that was really where our professional paths crossed. I would also add, just for your comfort, that even though we had positive and professional engagements anytime we met, I did not have any contact with him after he left to become governor of the Bank of England.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan, for clearing that up.
The knee-jerk reaction to this is to say, oh my goodness, they went to school together. Well, they technically did. They were in Oxford. Oxford is not a small school. And she said that their paths did cross. He was a year ahead of her because she came after him, and they were in different social circles, with which that all makes sense. And then the next time she saw him in a professional capacity was when he was the governor of the Bank of Canada. So I'm not going to be getting too animated over the fact that they used to go to school together. There's people that I used to go to school together. Doesn't mean I like them. Doesn't mean I got along with them. Doesn't mean that they're going to inspire any type of loyalty from me if I were to be in a similar situation that Annette Ryan is in. So let's just lay that out right there. I don't think that's a reason to jump all over this. My main concern in this is the fact that she has been working in government, and now she's moving into a role where she's supposed to be independent of government. But that's not the only concern that I have.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan. You said something which I thought was very interesting. You said, I will only serve one mandate. I will not seek a second mandate. This really caused me to reflect, because you've worked in the machinery of government at various levels. You held many positions. Your loyalty and your integrity have never been questioned. And as the parliamentary budget officer, you might be called to criticize some government policies. Do you commit not to work for government again after the end of your mandate? Well, that's really important as a question. Well, I haven't thought of that. I'll think about it and I can come back to you. Sure, if you can give us a written answer, it could be yes or no. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. But since you're the one who broached this topic, I think the question is relevant.
This is a relevant question. So what she had said earlier, and we didn't bother showing this, is that she's only seeking one mandate as a parliamentary budget officer. Now, to volunteer that, you got to say, well, that's interesting. And then when she's asked by the bloc, great question, well, are you going to commit to not work for the government afterwards? Oh, well, I haven't thought about that. Well, then what have you thought about? Because you've obviously thought about something, because you said, well, I'm not going to take this approach of, I'm not going to take more than one mandate. I'm not going to repeat that or apply to repeat that afterwards. So why is this a concern, or at least something that should be considered? Well, she came from government, moves into the parliamentary budget officer position, and then if she intends to just serve one mandate, well, that leads to something else. Is that going to lead to a promotion in Parliament? We don't know, but this is the speculation that stipulation causes. When you raise that, that's the follow-up question. And then when you say, well, I don't know, I'll give it some thought, it raises questions, and those aren't good questions to be raised when you're trying to actually secure a position like this. Now, to be completely fair, I don't want to jump all over Annette Ryan and demonize her before she's done her job. I don't think that's fair. She's going to be doing this job. She was just appointed to do the job. Let's judge her on her behavior. What's possible is that the Liberals appoint somebody who's kind of similar to Jason Jakes and who's not afraid to speak out. And it's not just her, remember, there's the whole existing apparatus of the Parliamentary Budget Office behind it, and Jason Jakes is still going to be there. So hopefully we're going to continue to have transparent discussion, we're going to have frank discussion, and we're going to have a Parliamentary Budget Officer who is going to call out the government. But if all of a sudden we get a complete about-face saying this is the best budget that we've ever seen and Canadians should be completely confident in it and there's no issue at all, that is when we're going to start holding her feet to the fire, because that is the complete opposite of what Jason Jakes and the previous parliamentary budget team had actually presented. And as a result of that presentation, this is where the OECD actually said, listen, you guys are the top dogs in holding governments to account in the OECD. So the jury will remain out for us at Northern Perspective, but there are some things to watch when it comes to the new parliamentary budget officer. But Mark Carney got his pick. He has his committee. And now he actually has to deliver. And if he can't, there's nobody else he can blame. Not even Donald Trump.